Welcome to the new Cannabis and Coffee Conversations podcast, brought to you by the ganjaactivist.com magazine. Each week, we'll bring you special guests spanning the spectrum of the burgeoning cannabis industry.
Well, no, let's back up a bit, because I found that
absolutely
interesting, because I'm actually seeing the same thing in kind of sort of in Jamaica. You would think that this would be a part of Jamper. That's our, I guess, Travel Canada, or Visit Canada organization, Destination Canada, sorry. So what, I mean, again, what did you find, and why did you find it peculiar, and what do you see as lacking, I guess?
Okay, awesome. So I'm about to submit a manuscript right now that has my findings, which is it's essentially an array of best practices that can be applied across the board. And so what's interesting is where I found, this is the interesting finding is, and this is consistent across the board, is there is a need for regulations around consumption.
Right.
Everywhere I go, people are saying that. And so it's true. When I went back and I read the Cannabis Act again, just kind of going through it, and consumption is not given nearly as much thought as production. The regulations heavily revolve around the production end of things, the distribution end of things, even the retail side of things. They write the rules.
And the packaging and so on. Right?
Exactly. Packaging, processing, how things can be displayed.
Right. Advertising, all of that they got down. Right. The tourism.
Exactly, right? All of those things. And so, but that's where it kind of ends with respect to rules around cannabis. So there's all kinds of regulations around the product itself, but what's lacking, and I think what can really improve both tourism and the cannabis industry itself and move more towards sustainability, is seriously considering how we can open up spaces for consumption.
Right, consumption lounges and so on.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's what comes to mind right off the bat. But I mean, that also includes restaurants where you can buy an infused meal, perhaps, or go to a lounge where you can buy a beverage and open it there at the table and have it on premise, and maybe have your laptop there and or have friends or whatever it might be, right? It's a little bit of a social experiment.
Well, exactly. Right. Yeah.
But I think that's the part that's missing. And I thought to myself, shoot, like this has to be dealt with because I don't think it's a responsible way to approach legalization. We need to give more thought to the consumer and to the rights, right? To the rights.
The consumer, right.
Oh, sorry, my phone is ringing. Let me just.
That's all right. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's the reason the industry started. But then it's become an industry where people are making money, and that's turned into, well, how can we make money? Oh no, we're losing money in our stocks and our this and that. It's like, it's like, what about the reason? It's like, what about the consumer? The patient?
Exactly. And so what I also found is, sort of diving a little bit deeper, is just understanding the context out of which federal legalization emerged, right? The context out of which the Cannabis Act was written. And this is a context of prohibition, right?
Right.
Substance not allowed. And what's interesting is that the Cannabis Act is, from how I interpret it, is it's largely influenced from a prohibitionist perspective.
Absolutely.
People who wrote the act, I mean, don't quote me on this part, but I mean, they were doctors, right? Lawyers, bureaucrats. I don't know if there is a cheerleader for cannabis.
Right. A consumer, somebody who's a conscious consumer.
Exactly.
No, I agree with you. That's in fact one of the things that I'm arguing in the magazine, and one of the reasons that give me the impetus to put it out is that even in the Caribbean, the approach to prohibition, or the approach to the cannabis industry, it's completely, it's not developmental whatsoever. It's more of a regulating. We want to limit it, restrict it as much as possible, extract as much tax as we can, because it's kind of illegal, but we'll allow it. So we're going to tax you for it. Everyone kind of limits in the way that you function as much as possible. And it's like, you can't develop an industry with these limitations. That makes no sense.
Yes, exactly. The barriers to entry are very challenging for especially small scale producers. And that's another problem in Canada with respect to challenges for developing tourism around cannabis, is that those small scale producers have those barriers, the cost of getting involved. And I mean, arguably, especially on the West Coast in British Columbia, the legacy market there. I mean, these are the foundations of cannabis.
And that is your tourism product. That's a huge part of the tourism product. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And so that's where I would like to see the country move towards. This is where I want my research to turn towards, is to understand the ways in which businesses are leveraging consumption spaces, because there are some businesses. There is actually a cannabis lounge in Ontario, and people can come and consume, and the person is very brilliant, very innovative, and she's figured out how to work around the regulation, right? She's found a loophole, and so she's capitalizing on the fact that she's found this loophole, and she's not doing anything wrong legislatively wise, right? Rule wise. When the inspectors come in, they can't, arrest her for doing anything wrong.
Sure.
There's a couple of instances where that's happened, and I think that it should be transparent. If people want to offer a space of consumption, there should be some kind of license involved, whether it be for a temporary space, right, at a festival, at an event, or a more permanent space. So if we're talking about, like, I don't know, a convention center, or maybe accommodations, or maybe even a cafe, that type of thing. There are a lot of different things to consider, and and so this is what I want to do next in my research, is to consider all the different ways and then come up with some kind of framework for regulating cannabis consumption in Canada, because I believe that once that happens, we'll start to see tourism pick up in a more significant way.
Well, what do you think? Because I mean, like, Jamaica is a great example because they have such a strong focus on the tourism industry. And I think they're right now, well, the last I was there just a few months ago, there are 2 dispensaries on site at hotels. Is that so really the question I'm getting at, who or there should be levels of collaboration between the hotel industry and the cannabis industry, but who needs to make that approach? Is it that the cannabis industry needs to be like, okay, come, you guys can offer these wonderful things, or is it the hotel industry or the tourism industry that needs to come and say, all right, we want to develop a product, let's work with you to develop tourism products? Like, where does that need to come, and how can it be facilitated?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. It's so good. Yes, that's absolutely it. There needs to be a coming together, because we have 2 industries that don't understand each other. There are some instances where there is overlap, right? Where someone might have experience in tourism, but also is experienced with cannabis as well. So most certainly, I think that's sort of fundamental to developing the industry in the early days, is the education, what cannabis tourism even is. And so this is exactly why the Canadian Cannabis Tourism Alliance has come together. There are individuals in Canada who are very innovative, they're entrepreneurial, and if they are just given the chance to utilize cannabis in this consumptive way, they will contribute, they can make an economic contribution to they are in Canada. So, sorry, I forgot where I was going with that. What was I saying? So bringing people together. So because consumption is such a gray area in Canada still, businesses don't know how to operate. And so they were reaching out to one another, trying to figure out, well, what are you doing? How are you doing it?
Right.
Their research with respect to how they could take the information they learned and back to their own business. And so a group of industry people got together at the beginning of 2022, and I was one of the people that was invited to the group because I was in contact with a number of different people through the research I was doing, trying to understand how cannabis tourism was developing in the first few years after legalization. And so that's exactly how this alliance emerged. It's a way to connect the people who need to be connected, to gain the information that they need. And you know what? To find the people who can do the work. Because as you said, the partnerships, that's key. In any tourism experience or any tourism product, the tourism supply chain is made up of a number of different sectors.
Exactly right.
And so working together, I mean, I think that approach, having a dispensary, right, retail on site at a resort, and then allowing space for consumption at that site, that is a winning strategy for cannabis tourism. We don't have that yet developed in Canada. But I think that that's a really great example of a partnership that needs to evolve between.
You guys have an interesting system in Canada, because you do have recreation is legalized, but so you need to buy it effectively from the government. So how does that then limit the ability to have spaces? Because effectively you're supposed to just consume, take it home, basically. If I'm a tourist now, what do? I have to hang it in the cold? Do I get arrested? How does that? Obviously an issue that you're dealing with, but how is it at the moment? How does the government look at it at the moment?
Well, they haven't. I don't think.
Okay, all right. Point taken.
I think that this is something that's just starting to become part of the conversation. This whole idea of, but there's a whole part of the cannabis value chain that is yet to be considered with respect to regulation, and that is consumption. And so you said taking it home and consuming, private spaces for sure. But then think about, I always compare it to wine. For example, wine, you can take it home, consume it in a private space. You can also go out, purchase it at a restaurant. Right, have it part of the meal, go to a bar, right? There are spaces where you can purchase the alcohol and consume it on premise. And so that's a model for consumption.
And that's regulated as well. It's not just kind of a free-for-all, that is also regulated. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And this is definitely where consideration needs to be made. And it's a great question, because it supports my argument directly in that not considering consumption is not a responsible approach to legalization. We need to consider consumption because we have tourists, and this is anecdotal information. I've spoken with people, been in situations with people where they think that they can come to Canada, purchase the cannabis, right? That's number one.
Which you can, right?
Which you can, perfect. But then they think they can smoke it anywhere.
Right.
That's not the case. You can't just get up, right, and smoke cannabis. I mean, there are certain instances where you can, but again, it's a gray area, and it's not the same across the country. So the problem with that is now we have people, not even citizens, right? Never mind citizens. Now we have people coming over, visiting our country, getting in trouble, not knowingly, right? So what happens when a police officer walks by and they get in trouble? What if they're from South Korea, right? Where they're not allowed out abroad and cannabis, right? They won't be let back in the country, right? What are you going to do, Canada? Like, do you have, like, what's the, should we not think about this? Is it not the responsible thing to do? Because as we said at the beginning, the legal status now that cannabis has in Canada federally at the federal level. I mean, this is significant. I've heard it been talked about as sort of Canada putting its neck out. take the risk. We've taken the risk.
It should be done properly though as well. Yeah.
Exactly.
And responsibly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly, because you know what? People are looking, right? People are watching. Well, what's
Almost
Canada doing? And I've had a lot of people contact me and ask, they're beginning to wonder where are the lounges? Why hasn't cannabis tourism developed about, like, why doesn't Canada have lounges? Like, why isn't the tourism, like, they're not understanding why it's developing in the States. That's a great example. And this is again where I want to do more research, because they're writing the regulations. They're writing regulations around spaces,
consumption spaces,
right? With respect to smoking. Now, that's another challenge in Canada, is the entrenched non-smoking, smoke-free, right? The smoke-free laws. No smoking laws. Like, this is something that's entrenched across the country. And this was a significant victory for public health as well. And so
so they're still celebrating it. They're not going to do anything about
and
that.
So I understand the concern. I get it. However, cannabis is not tobacco.
Same, right, exactly.
Cannabis is not alcohol. The regulations from alcohol and tobacco, although it seems appealing to draw from them in order to inform the regulations around cannabis, I think that cannabis needs its own set.
This is true, because it's a different substance. It has different effects on people. And that's the next thing. I mean, even in Trinidad and Tobago, there's just a huge anti-vaping sentiment. And it doesn't matter what you're vaping, because e-cigarettes or cannabis or whatnot, it does not matter. And I'm like, no, you can't do that, because a couple bad reports about tainted e-cigarettes, you're gonna now ban the whole thing. It's like, yo, you're doing this completely wrong. This is just not the appropriate approach. We're still human beings. We're not little children in a playpen to be just kind of taken care of and so on. We're adults. Please let us make our appropriate decision.
Exactly. And that brings up a great point, actually. That point being that this industry is still growing up.
Right. Sure.
It was just born a couple years ago. Well, not really. I mean, the legal part was born. The industry has been around a very long time.
Exactly right. This is very true. Right on.
We always have to remember that, right? So it's growing. It's, at the very least, the Cannabis Act in Canada, I mean, it's a place to start. It's a place It's a place
it's a foundation.
Exactly. So it's early days, and we're still learning and growing. And I think to a certain extent, as well, the industry has to prove itself. And tourism is a great platform to demonstrate, I believe, how cannabis can be responsibly incorporated into leisure activities during recreational time, when you're on vacation, on a family trip, just like you can tobacco, just like you can wine, that type of substance. And I think too that once we get to that point, which will be a while, I think
it'll be a little while, unfortunately. Cognitive dissonance is a very strong force, I'm realizing, unfortunately.
But it's going to be big, I think. I think it's going to be big, like wine tourism. I think there's
I mean, that's what that to me is a model to look at. That we should be looking at across the Caribbean, across the world. In fact, I want to do very shortly. I'm actually now about to start funding for it, some crowdfunding for a documentary that's going to in fact look at how all these various countries have deregulated or decriminalized cannabis, what they're doing, what their policies, how friendly they are to the consumer. Are they benefiting businesses? Are they benefiting the consumer? Are they benefiting, is it just to open up economics to small farmers and you don't know what you're going to do with it? What's really happening? Of course, because I'll be traveling, we have to deal with cannabis tourism. So I'll always be trying to smoke up wherever I am. So that's going to be an issue. Right? So that's going to be it. I have to come visit you up in Canada.
Totally. Oh my gosh, you must tell me. You must tell me when you are here. You must tell me, and I'll take you around. I have good people here too who know how to show a good time. So
Right. With cannabis, without getting
with
busted.
cannabis, yes,
It's just,
absolutely.
yeah, no, that which is what you need, you know what I mean? Which is what's, I mean, again, as you said, it opens up. There's so many add-on or effects that you have when you have cannabis tourism, because there's so many sectors that
Yeah.
trickle into it.
Yeah.
There's so many different levels of job opportunities
Right.
available. It's profound. It's profound. Just tell me something. I didn't ask this before. How do you define cannabis tourism? Like when you're speaking with your government officials and they're saying, yeah, we want to open it up, we have the recreational, they're thinking, oh, you just want to have some crazy rave ganja parties. What is cannabis tourism, and what should it really look like in your?
Okay, well, let me hold on. Can I cheat? And I want to go to because I'll give you the definition. What's it? I'll give you the definition that I gave them, and that I use in my own research, my own writing. And that is cannabis tourism. It's not any one thing. It's a culmination of a variety of activities, events, places, as well as the people that make up a trip, or that are part of travel, or that come together as part of the vacation experience, that to some degree incorporates cannabis. And that incorporation might be through production, it might be through consumption, which includes purchase as well,
Right.
but it can also include education into the experience. And all of these things can happen in the context of medical, leisure, and business tourism contexts. One of the big points that I usually like to make is that cannabis tourism doesn't necessarily have to involve consuming the actual plant in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
It can be an opportunity to learn about cannabis.
Right.
In Ontario, the Tweed cannabis, which is canopy growth.
Canopy, right? Yeah.
They opened a facility in Ontario, and from the get-go, part of the plan was to open a visitors facility where people could come to the facility, the plant itself, and learn about cannabis. And so it was like a little museum, like it's a museum.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Walk in, and there are displays, and there are rooms with videos, and there are timelines, and there's interactive things. Right. You can take your phone out and do stuff, and they have a terpene bar, and you can smell things, and there's a gift shop as well. At no point, as part of this experience, can you purchase cannabis or can you consume cannabis.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Right. Very arguably, you're still engaging in a tourism experience. So that's how I see it. It's a number of different activities. Cannabis, you mentioned, it adds an additional layer to the experience. It can be a tool for enhancing the experience as well.
Right,
I've heard
that's what I see it definitely
described in that way. And so it covers a broad, because the definition is so broad, I mean, it covers a broad array of activities and events and circumstances where cannabis.
So why would you think that, like, the Canadian government even, why would they not have looked at this as something to capitalize on? You're opening it up. This should go hand in hand, especially if you're opening it up, then that people are going to want to come to consume. It's like, that's the whole argument with Amsterdam that had to, with all the chaos that's happening there with them kind of half in, half out or whatever. But that was the attraction. They were the only ones, you know what I mean? So, and that was the space to do these things. How could it not be taken into consideration? I guess there's a real question there, but yeah, I want to comment on that.
It's a great question. It's a great question. And you know why it's a great question is because I am in the middle of writing another paper that answers that. And it has to do out of the ideology out of which the Cannabis Act was written. It was written by people of a prohibitionist mentality. And so the language the language that's used in the Cannabis Act revolves around public health, right? Public health and safety, all of the regulations for production, distribution, advertising, marketing, all of it has to do with public health and safety.
And there are fears around public health and safety.
Right, exactly. So one of the key, exactly, public health and safety for a substance that we have to be fearful around. And so part of this ideology is a restrictive and prohibitive approach.
Right. Okay. Right.
And this is all part of strategies for risk reduction. So in this context, even offering the idea that spaces of consumption are possible goes against the whole idea of risk reduction.
Right,
well, of course,
exactly.
we're not going to allow people to smoke in designated spaces because that's terrible for their health. Arguably, it's the other way around. Right? Arguably, I mean, from what I understand, we can serve public health and safety by offering these spaces in
Exactly.
And it's again it's a human rights thing as well.
I believe so.
It's a human rights thing. People should be entitled, and like you said, it's a half in, half out approach, because when it comes to consumption, it still very much feels like we're in a prohibitionist era.
Absolutely.
Like in terms of consumption, right? I went traveling just to different places in Canada, and like trying to find a place to consume, have a joint. I was always looking over my shoulder as to whether, and I'm like, wow, this might as well be illegal right now.
Right. No, it's I was just at an event in Trinidad and Tobago, just got here a few months ago, second industry event, very, very small. And I lit up and people were like, what the hell are you doing, man? That's what you're doing that. I'm like, but it's an event. What are you talking about? That's the whole reason we're doing this. So there's even that, there is that level of it's a huge disconnect.
Yes.
I guess there is somewhat of the sentiment, especially here, that especially in Trinidad, because they've issued with the regulations, but they haven't set up the regulatory body, so they haven't issued any licenses or anything. And so the prevailing thought is now becoming, which is what I thought, some time ago, was that they've just kind of decriminalized just to kind of ease up on the flow of criminals through the court system and ease that up a little bit, appease people, make them feel happy. Yeah, we are progressive, we're moving forward just like the rest of the world, and then not push it with it. And it's like, well, yeah, we have to talk about this. We need the media behind y'all. This is why I'm here. It's like we need to really push to get the public opinion up and really raise the issue. This is what you're squandering. This is what you're not paying attention to. This is what you're not developing. This is, I mean, if you really want to leave it to just the big money people and take it away from the criminals, quite frankly, the big money people are acting just like the criminals. They want the turf, they want the corners, they want the territory. They might not pull out guns, but they're gonna pull out something else to, it'll get ugly. And it is in many, many ways. I mean, I was watching a webinar, and somebody asked a question about opening up a dispensary somewhere like in Chicago or something. And the person was like, well, we're the biggest MSO in the state, so let me know exactly where you want to open it, because make sure it's not one place that we're looking at, because if you are, we're gonna kill you, we're gonna crush you, just don't even think about it. And that's gangster. I mean that's gangster. So I don't know, taking it out of one hand, putting it into other, when it's really about it's just there's the different approaches need to be ventured.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, that the documentary you're talking about, that it sounds so interesting because there are so many different approaches. I think too that, just to go back, I just thought of another thing to say for the question was like, why wasn't consumption considered? I think stigma is still a big thing. Production, processing, distribution, even retail, that's not where stigma lives. Stigma lives here.
In the use, and even consumption, in the acquisition, and
in the act itself. That is where stigma lives. And so it's much easier to deal with production than in that way. right? So we won't worry about, we'll just,
Set
essentially
standards and whatever, and we'll do
exactly.
Right.
And I mean, to be fair, the Cannabis Act does mention consumption. It's something that is delegated to the provinces, which is similar to how the retail is set up, because there are certain rules. The provinces are allowed to make up the rules for retail and for consumption. So rules will differ from province to province, depending on what the values are of the province. Some provinces don't allow for any public consumption of cannabis whatsoever.
It's like the friends with like Quebec and Montreal, I think.
Yes, exactly.
And they smoke so that much. It's like, what the hell? You brought smoking to us, damn it. What's wrong with you?
Right? It's very, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think that still has, that plays a key role as well. And so, I mean, that's why, this is also why I have my background here, because that I'm trying to challenge the stigma in what I do as a researcher, in what I do as an academic. I would like to be a professor when I grow up. I want to publish papers. I want to earn funding. These are things I'm already doing. Like, I'm already proving myself. I'm already on my way. I have something to say. People are noticing, right, with the CCTA. And I smoke a shit ton of weed, Omari.
Right on. And you're highly productive. There you go. It's like, what's up?
And I'm highly, it is something that I used to be functional.
Right. And no, and that's the thing, man. People just really don't get it. This whole stoner image thing needs to end. I was even thinking the other day, because I've been trying to get this magazine going, moving for a little bit, and we're running a little bit behind, but not too much. And I'm thinking, oh man, I should probably cut down on the smoking. And it's like, then I started thinking, I'm like, with my friends and family members who don't consume, they're lazier than me. I'm like, wait just a second. I was like, no, get that out of your head. Stop. Don't let the propaganda start to penetrate. You know what I mean? It's like, keep that out. Forget it. Go have a slip of joy. And get back to work. I mean, but the stigma is strong. It's everywhere. It is all around. It's
exactly. It is all around. And I mean, I'm grateful for legalization for that, because I mean, I was able to come out of the closet, so to speak, because I was consuming cannabis, because I recognized how it affected me and my mental state and my thoughts. And so I learned how to use it to my advantage. And so I was able to get myself off certain pharmaceuticals, right, and move towards using this plant as a way of sustaining my well-being. And so that's a big part of the message. That's a big part of the message as well. So I'm not sure where I was going with that, but stigma, we were talking about stigma,
yes.
Right? And just, pushing forward and, continuing to do the things that we do, and to show people who might be skeptical that we are legitimate.
Absolutely. I mean, I consider being I move forward with the knowledge that I'm on the right side of history. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's like, because they've done a lot of things wrong. You are on the right side of history. You're definitely, again, the world needs this. And it's just obviously, especially being a supporter, you would never anticipate that it would be such a level of pushback. Look at the studies that still come out about cannabis are almost all geared towards trying to find out what's negative about it. And they still can't find it. There's not enough research. There's not enough research proving what you want to prove, because it does not exist. You understand? The evidence is not there. And it's just, and that's what a lot of it is, because they're still trying to regulate this. Let's try to see how dangerous this is so we can regulate it properly. It's like, well, you see, you're not finding the dangers because it's not dangerous. So just let it be. If anything, you can regulate retroactively. Now, if you see, okay, wow, these THC diamonds thing, 100% THC, that's right. Let's keep that off the shelf. Let's keep that for pharmaceutical grade shit for people who are really sick. And let's just get these ganja flowers out to people because they really want them. They're happy, and it's less crime, it's less violence out there. I mean, less rambunctious people. You can have a bunch of sports people, football hooligans, soccer hooligans, smoking up a spliff or smoking up a bong. I guarantee you they're not going to fight after the match. You know what I mean? They're going to be pissed off each other. All right, I'm bad at him. All right, let's go smoke another bong and call it a day. You're not going to be throwing around and breaking furniture and breaking police cars and overturning. This is not going to happen. Trust me.
Yes. Yes, there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of how it can be, of consumers, right?
And that too. And there will be the negative element that's going to happen. That is the way it is with everything. And you cannot base an entire industry on the few potential negative elements when there's
That's
so
it.
many more benefits. And if you have the supportive framework for the positives, then you're just gonna push away the negative, and then the next we're gonna learn how to do things more appropriately, because this is gonna be more conducive. Everything is kind of gray and black and white. Yeah, they're gonna also fuck up, do mistakes. Proper guidance, proper education, and they won't make those mistakes.
That's so good, because that's, man, you're hitting on all the points, man, because these are all the things that I'm reading about, like providing, like I'm putting together manuscripts that I'm hoping to get published this year. But yeah, the supportive framework for the positive that you're talking about, in my mind, my argument is well-being. Like, imagine, I always say to people, okay, imagine if the Cannabis Act was written from a perspective of well-being.
Right.
And not
it would be permitting this, recommend against such usage, and so on and so forth, instead of
imagine, right? I mean, I fundamentally believe cannabis is a medicine. And I don't need to explain to people that it saves my life every day. Therein lies the power for me to go forward and advocate for the plant, for tourism, wherever it shows up. And I think that's maybe why I'm maybe less, not prone, but like when people get, what's the word? Maybe hesitant or negative about what I'm championing for. I know fundamentally that cannabis is a source of well-being for me. It is a medicine for me. And so how can that be bad? How can what I'm doing right now,
it works for you,
bad,
right?
Right? In a significant way. So it makes me more confident going out, just being a champion for the plant, in whatever way I can.
No, I agree. I have few regrets. Just a lot of, a lot of just, I guess, disappointments with how people respond. But it's like, I guess it's to be expected. When the wind changes, everything will change. It'll become a level of normal. I keep saying I really am curious to know what the world was like, and what the media and what the sentiment was like when the US stopped prohibition on alcohol. Was there this period of people like, oh, you should stay away? Then you have those who want to use it and say, no, but it's good. And then all of a sudden now it's like rude if you don't bring it to a dinner party. I mean, how long did that take? I mean, was that there or was it not? I'm really curious, because I mean, that's where we're heading. It's just interesting to see that, wow, we're in this world where you have access to this information, and people just cannot assimilate it into their reality. This is like, no, cognitive dissonance. No, it's bad. It's like, but we're showing you. I need evidence. We're showing you evidence. Okay,
I'm the evidence. We're the evidence.
That's the thing. It's crazy. It's the mind. It's always the mind is an interesting tool that we possess.
It's
easy, very different to change, but easy to adapt. So, if we just normalize it, eventually it will become completely adapted and completely normal. And 25 years from now, ganjaactivists.com wouldn't need to exist, because what are you activisting about? Milk, we drink it every day. It's the same thing.
Oh, really good point. There's an evolution, right, of that.
I suspect there would be,
Yeah, that's very true. And actually, that kind of falls into line with what we've been thinking about too at the Canadian Cannabis Tourism Alliance, because I mean, right now it's an advocacy group. We need to advocate for ways in which people can commercialize the public consumption of cannabis, so that we have tourism operators who can benefit. There are ways that they can contribute to the economy, right? We need normalizing and getting the nation to that point is what the organization, the CCTA, is about. At some point, the organization will flip and turn more into a destination marketing organization.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of regulating what's going on. So this is what's
Right. So
happening.
now it's
Yeah.
regulated. We have BC, we have Ontario, Alberta. So now it will be at a point of acceptance, of tolerance. Normalization will be at a level where we can go out and advertise to Australia that we have these opportunities in cannabis tourism.
Right. Yeah.
Come on over to Canada and have these opportunities. We're not there yet.
Right.
And so it's an interesting evolution, a parallel.
It's a journey, yeah.
Right? It's a parallel to maybe what you might be experiencing as well on your journey.
I think it's gonna be similar all over the place. It's just it needs to be developed as an industry and not as something to regulate and restrict and to this is a completely wrong approach. Notwithstanding, it's like you got the black market that's fueled with billions of unwashed dollars. It's like I don't know. It's like you understand the competition, right? I mean, it's not. It's like I don't get it.
Yes. I know. But it definitely. I mean, there's definitely a loosening of this idea of restrictions around drugs worldwide.
Right. This is true. Well, because the war on drugs has not worked. It has been a war on people, and people now finally said that since the news stories, the crack craze, that has died down significantly. Thank God. It's the preconceived notion that people approach the industry with are just profound. It's interesting seeing how to dismantle it. I don't know. A lot of people just think we just have to wait for some old people to die and then let the younger people come in. I mean, it's like, I'm not gonna say no.
Along those lines, like I've met some really good people, yourself included, in this industry. And that also gives me hope. I know that there are some people, I've also met some people that I don't like the way they approach things. I don't
absolutely. Same,
I mean, but also I am a terrible capitalist. I'm a terrible capitalist. Like I'm not a business person. The whole idea of profit and gaining more and more and more and more and more and more and more. The idea of greed, essentially, like I don't understand, like, why do we have to work for profit? Why can't we work for like decent human working conditions? Why can't we work for the environment? Like what? Anyway,
incentives. No, I agree. I'm probably 3/4 of a capitalist, but certainly not. I couldn't say full on. I certainly
but also this is what makes me, I think, also maybe an academic, but maybe appropriate for the role as well, because I don't have monetary motivations. I mean, I want to be able to pay my bills and buy my kids food and have a house over their head and get them to and from school and sustainable, right?
Live a proper, comfortable, proper life. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, it's just about, at this point, doing what's right, the right thing to do.
That's why you want to be a professor. I mean, that works well.
Yes. Exactly.
You can get your tenure, you can do all your things.
I would love to. And then passing the message on to students. That's huge, right? Having that audience of young minds ready to learn and take things in. And so I that's a very privileged position. I know how privileged I am to be able to be in that spot and to be able to influence them in that way.
And how are students responding to cannabis tourism? Is it just, great little fun? I mean, how are they looking at it? As in addition to tourism, I mean, they might be interested in hospitality. Yes. Is it, what's the take on it?
Well, the first time I announced it to my class, I had a few students stand up and they applaud.
That would have been me. That would have been really like, woo-hoo!
But there still is a lot of stigma. Most often though, they're interested in understanding what it is because I
Yeah.
think that a lot of people have that in common. Oh, cannabis tourism, what do you mean by that? And it's not just cannabis tourism itself, but it's the whole set of issues that surround it, the regulations, environmental, social, the social responsibility. And so I'm able to incorporate it into a lot of my classes. I think that's what a good professor should be able to do, is to take research, right? Cutting edge learning, right? Knowledge building in
It's all
motion.
new. It's all new too. So
Right. And then be able to transfer that to students and say, you know, when you're talking about a theory, I love doing that, talking about a theory, and then giving them an example of how the theory plays out in real life, and then using cannabis tourism to show them. And it's
Right,
always,
right.
you can see the curtains opening, like, ta-da, and they're like, ah.
Right.
I love
Okay.
doing that. I
Excellent.
love doing that.
Excellent. Excellent.
But I mean, I think that students also take me pretty seriously as well. And they respect.
I would that would be interesting, because I can imagine a lot would be like, oh, Canada tourism, awesome, that's just gonna be easy credits. Let's take that course, whatever, you know. I can, that's
Yeah,
interesting,
and so that's the other thing too. Like, I'm not an easy grader. I do not give out A's easily. It
okay,
is
right.
like
Right on, okay.
I know what it takes. I know what an A
Well, you're
paper
suited for the
looks like,
role then, right on. Okay.
right? Like I have graded, like, no, not joking you, thousands of undergraduate papers, graduate papers. So like, I know, like a lot of students, they like to challenge you on the grade.
Right,
Not
yeah.
a lot, but sometimes they do. And I just kind of turn around and say, you know, that's fine. You have your right to do that. You have your right to come to me, express to me what you're going to say. But I've been doing this for 15 years.
Right.
I know what the grade is.
Right
And
on, right on.
I always tell them where they can, always tell them where they
Right.
need improvement. Like, it's
Right on,
never,
right on.
anyway. So there's a degree of respect that's earned between
Right,
student
okay.
and professor.
Right.
So even students who do give me a hard time, usually by the end of the term, they know I'm serious.
Right.
I'm serious. Yeah, like I will, when it comes down to it, I will do the hard work. I have what it takes to accomplish the rigor, but I'll do the right thing. I will
Right.
always do the right thing at the end of the day. And so if that means having to apologize to students or, you know, whatever that might be, then so be it, right? So be it. That's the way it is. So.
No, I mean, it's just, I would just say, I'm happy you can establish that level of respect, because I could see people. I mean, I know people. I was not the best college student. I would have definitely looked at that and be like, well, I get how many credits for that? Are you kidding me? You know, I would have got into that, not even thinking about taking it serious.
Yeah, I think too that I'm able to talk honestly with students. Because, I mean, going through undergrad was one of the best times in my entire life. I went to the University of Waterloo. I loved doing the work. I loved it. I loved it. I loved going to classes. I took the notes. I went to the library. Like, I just loved it.
Yeah.
And so that's right. That's where I knew, right, I was gonna find
Right on. Okay, right.
And so I can really I can relate. I can relate to what they're going. I know how hard it is. I also have, right, I can relate to things like depression and anxiety, all of those types of mental situations. So I like to be able to to be honest with the student and just find the spot where they will feel comfortable doing the work, right? Engage. Yes. Yes. Engage with me. Do the work. Just show me, right? Show me that you can think. Like, I want to.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I
I'm
know
sure a lot
that.
of people come to say, well, no, this is what I meant. They say, well, it's not in the paper, so
right.
I can't give you the grade. You know what I mean? That's
exactly.
Next time, now you know what to do. Bye-bye.
Totally. Exactly. That's exactly it. And students appreciate that too, right? That's part of building the respect. So when they get their first assignment back, they have all of this feedback, and the students who actually read the feedback and consider it the next time around, they will be getting A+.
Right on.
And usually they do. They will improve a full grade and a half, sometimes 2 grades. So it's like I said, it's a privilege to be able to do that. And a big part of the job. And then another part of the job as well is the service part, right? Servicing, so being the director of the program or a chair of the program, like doing some kind of like administrative role within the academic setting, in addition to the teaching, in addition to the research. And so from the way I see it, being part of the CCTA is illustrating that I can accomplish that task because it's a service I'm providing, right? This is a service to the industry in this case, right? In terms of organizing, putting people together, advocating, learning a ton of stuff.
There's a lot to learn. Every day there's new things to learn. It's insane.
Oh my gosh. And just being so grateful for the people that it has brought together. Like I said, just the incredible people that I have met and am able to work with. It's because of these people that we're going to see movement in cannabis tourism. In the cannabis, I say cannabis tourism, but I really think it's about the cannabis industry more broadly, right? We need a more sustainable cannabis value chain. And in order to attain that more sustainable value chain, we need to open up possibilities for consumption, spaces of consumption.
Right. And again, and allow the public to then engage with cannabis in a different way. Then you also see how the industry should roll out or will roll out, because now you have real scientific evidence, if you will, hard scientific evidence as things are rolling out. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. We're rounding an hour. Goodness, this has been a delightful conversation.
Time flies, man.
I want to get back to because I'd love to hear you answer this one again. Where, of course, my handwriting is absolutely. I'd asked you about how you got involved in it. Why what cannabis tourism, and you're speaking about the economic geography. Yes, tell me a little bit about that and just how that came about. Yeah.
Okay. So my formal academic training is as an economic geographer. So essentially what that means is understanding how the economy shows up in different ways in different places. And so tourism is an economic activity, right? As is manufacturing, as is mining or any other extraction type activity. Retail as well. These are all economic activities, and they happen in space. So we will be able to see evidence of it tangibly in the landscape. And so I'm interested in how those economic activities vary from place to place, how they're the same, how they're different. And so tourism is an interesting economic activity in which to understand these patterns of spatial variation, because everywhere in the world engages in tourism to some degree, but arguably there are elements of each place that are different.
Right. So it makes tourism interesting, right?
And so it makes, exactly. And so that is what contributes to creating the appeal, right? We talked about the appeal of place. So yeah, I mean, at the heart of it, I'm interested in spatial patterns. Everything is a spatial issue to me. We talked about how consumption is a spatial issue. It requires a space.
A space to do so, absolutely.
Right. We talk about, even the spaces of our everyday lives, our home, right? The sidewalks, the school, these are the geographies of our everyday life, right? So this is what I have been mostly teaching about, is most of my teaching has been in geography, human geography, economic geography, I can't even think. Human and the environment. So there's resources in the environment, as well as tourism classes. In addition to that, so my interest is broader than tourism, I suppose. It's much broader than cannabis, I suppose, as well. Right. I'm most certainly an advocate for the industry. I work in the industry. I do research in the industry, but that's not entirely what my big picture is about. I have larger, right? So I have other interests as well. So I do want to write outside. I want to do research outside of tourism. I want to look into more of the production end of cannabis,
Okay.
actually agricultural
Right.
value.
How that, yeah.
So doesn't necessarily involve tourism, but it's an economic activity that takes place in a spot that requires relationships with other businesses. It requires regulations, all of these things that are necessary to create businesses. This is what I'm interested in. This is my academic evolution. And then cannabis just happened to become legalized at the perfect time. For me, in my career path, because I was finishing my PhD. I got my PhD, my doctorate from York University. And so I was finishing up my PhD. I looked at the relationship between agriculture and tourism, actually, in Ontario. So I already had a background in that. And I was trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do next? I need something. What can I do next? And that's when I came across, oh my gosh, full circle, Omari. That's when I came across the article in National Geographic from Destination Canada that said, oh, we don't speculate that legalization is going to have any impact on tourism.
Right. Like,
What? Are you serious? Like, this is part of a value chain that has a regulatory environment that's absolutely going to dictate how tourism will go. And so I went down, I didn't go down, but I went to the literature, and I actually found studies that had taken place in Colorado. There were researchers in the United States that had already researched cannabis tourism. And so there was one in Colorado and in Oregon as well. And now there's some coming out of California. And I'm like, what? This is a thing? Like, I can research cannabis tourism?
Tourism.
I called the guy up and I'm like, I need to do this for Canada. I need to figure out how I can study, get money from the government, right? Create a livelihood for myself. And so that I did. I wrote an application for a postdoctoral fellow scholarship from the Canadian government. And that is indeed where I received my funding to do the research, the first phase of my research anyway, my early career work in understanding how tourism in Canada has been rolled out. And so now we're almost 5 years in and we have to figure out where we have to go from here. So they've just finished the review. And so it will be interesting to see if that's going to change anything, if it's going to make anyone any happier. Or not. That's where we're headed. There is progress, I think, being taken place, happening.
All right. So what do you, I was going to ask, what do you think is going to happen next? So what would you like to see happen next as the next stage? Or even as a result of some of the work you're doing, what would you, and so with the governments, are you speaking with people? What actions do you want to see happening?
Yeah, well, this is where I want to understand, where we need to find common ground when it comes to understanding what can we provide to the citizens in terms of meeting their needs, what is comfortable to you as regulators, where you feel comfortable doing it. In Amsterdam, they have a 4 or 5 year project. I can't remember now what it's called. It's escaping my mind, but they have a research project where cannabis cafes are being used as research centers or whatever, where people are consuming in space, and they're not doing research on medical, like on the medical effect. They're looking at the social effect. And they're doing it slowly. It's a 4-year study. And so I would say the same thing to the Canadian government. We need to find the places where cannabis tourism is developing, right? There's West Coast, Alberta, Edmonton, and Calgary as well. Ontario, and even in the East Coast, there are places where cannabis tourism is emerging. Go to those places, and this is an experiment at this point, right? Trying to figure out, all right, so what are the rules that we need to have in place? I know that in Calgary, they're moving towards, and actually I think they do have regulations where they allow for consumption of cannabis at festivals.
Right. Okay.
That's right. And
Right. All right.
That's huge, right?
Little bit of a breakthrough. All right.
Little bit. That's the way we need to do it. So now what I want to see is, okay, well, I want to see that model. Let's transfer it to Ontario now. And so there have been events in Ontario run by media companies and do have consumption spaces, but I don't know under what circumstances they are allowed. I haven't had a chance and opportunity to talk, right? But wouldn't it be great if they were just able to apply for a license for a temporary space of consumption?
Space, right?
Like no questions asked. We have a consumption lounge. It's licensed. And so understanding, and I think this is where the research comes in, like understanding what does licensed mean, right? What are the rules? What rules do we need to come up with?
What are the restrictions? Right.
Exactly. So in Calgary, for example, I believe that it has to be blacked out. Like there has to be a blackout screen, so you can't be visible.
See inside.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
So that's one. Another stipulation is that there can be no alcohol involved.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of rolling out. Like the Amsterdam was kind of like that. Like you can get beer and wine, but no hard liquor. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but that seems to be a model that everyone's jumping on.
Exactly. Or, I mean, how about, I would really like to see, and this is what they're doing in the States, they're taking retail, so something that's already part of the cannabis supply chain, and they are opening up those retail spaces as lounges. So it's a very similar model to the Amsterdam coffee shops where you
can okay.
purchase your cannabis on site and then consume it on premise. And they're working on that. And I think that is something too. I mean, that it's going to roll out slowly, but we need to find the pilot projects, if you will, right? The people who we know can do it responsibly. And again, this is where the CCTA is of great benefit to the government, because all of these people are good people. They're responsible people. They want to do right. This is a vetted membership. They're people who do want to do the right thing, and that's why they're coming together. And so there's support. There's support for it, and it's gaining support. And it's about putting that bug in the ear of the people who need to hear.
Exactly right.
And getting it louder and louder. Yeah.
Right on. All right, that's it. All right, Susan, I'm thank you so much for all of your time. This has been a great conversation. We have to do this again, just off the record, just to chat. I'm really interested in actually some of the work you're doing. Just the concept of studying cannabis tourism. It's like what? That's I think that's brilliant. I mean, because there's so much to it, because because it is at this right moment where we're developing it. There's so many things that you could be looking at, you could be studying. There's so many different inputs. You could say, wow, this opens up a whole new craft and services sector that could be interesting. It can only be interesting, your work. I have to admit, there's something that we're trying to push in Jamaica, which is kind of pet name for it is Amsterdam. And that's to effectively allow for the free trade of cannabis and cannabis products in the grill. That's like on the western Jamaica, very notorious for cannabis. It's the most notorious spot for cannabis, well, in all of Jamaica at least. So because they have the history, like, well, why don't you allow us to do it legally and see what develops out of it? Let's get our entrepreneurs involved. Let's develop this and that. So that's something they're trying to have a conversation on. They have voiced it, but then when you speak to some of the politicians, they're like, I didn't hear about that. And I was like, I was in that conversation when we mentioned it, you know what I mean? But anyways, so we'll see. But again, this is what this is about, raising the voice, and hopefully, we'll either incite, inspire, or shame people into taking appropriate actions. That's the only way it's going to be done.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. We'll enlighten the people.
Right. Exactly right. That's what it's all about. All right. Once again, thank you so much for your time. I will let you go now. Get back to your work and to your kids and to your life.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Cannabis and Coffee Conversations podcast, brought to you by ganjaactivist.com magazine. Join us every Friday for a new episode.